If there is one thing most people can enjoy, it's playing a fun video game. It is a perfect way of relaxing after a long day, or a way to make the day less boring. However, video games are much more than simply games. It's a whole industry after all. The development of games is a long and grueling process. Working, pitching, coding, development, tweaking and perfecting. There has gone a lot of work into every game you ever played, and a bunch of time too. But of course, not every game gets published. A whole bunch of games got simply cancelled for whatever reasons. The company went bankrupt, the project was too expensive, or maybe they just couldn't finish it at all. Many of these games were anticipated from fans, yet they never came out. So this is not only a deep dive into the many failed projects of the gaming industry, but also a kind of tale about the many sequels, prequels, and beta versions of the games we play every now and again. Each game has a long and interesting story, and we're going to understand 6 layers of these stories. So get ready, because we're about to jump down the rabbit hole of the forgotten video games that were never made. Silent Hills. Silent Hills was a cancelled survival horror game made by Kojima Productions. If you have a keen eye and is a very dedicated fan, you might be able to guess that the Silent Hills is a part of the Silent Hill franchise, but only if you're a truly dedicated fan. It was going to be the 9th installment to the game, but was scrapped in 2015. The game's cancellation seems to be caused by a feud between developers and publishers, that being Kojima Productions and Konami. There had been rumors in the office of both companies that Kojima Productions and the lead director, Hideo Kojima, wanted to leave Konami and their work after making a different game, which was The Phantom Pain. In the same time these rumors were going about, Konami wanted to reconstruct its gaming industry, which also meant writing off all references to Kojima and the Kojima Company. While all this chaos was going on underground, a Konami spokesman said publicly that Kojima wasn't leaving the company at all and would still be involved in the Metal Gear franchise and other games in the future. Yet that didn't mean that the chaos surrounding Silent Hill was over. On April 26, 2015, Assistant Director Guillermo del Toro announced at San Francisco Film Studio that Silent Hills were cancelled for good. This led to something of an outcry on Twitter, but it's Twitter, so it's probably just Thursday or something. This specific case of a cancelled game is so big that it could probably fill an entire video. There were many things in this case, like the 200,000 strong petition to get the game finished by someone else, or the fact that the lead protagonist, Norman Reedus, was happy that the game got cancelled, but all this is beside the point. Right now, the remnants of what should have been a new Silent Hill game is collecting dust someplace in Japan, maybe never to be released again. Unless someone thinks the game still has potential, but that is something for the future, if ever. Star Fox 2. Star Fox 2 was a continuation and sequel to the classic Nintendo video game franchise of the same name. The game was cancelled back in 1995 in fears that releasing the game would damage Nintendo's image and make more chaos than profit. Star Fox 2, which was already pushing the limits of SNES game graphics, would be seen as an old generation 3D game, which would be behind both PlayStation and Sega's new released 3D game systems. Therefore, Nintendo opted to release Star Fox 64 a bit later on to make themselves look better among video game fans. Nintendo thought that releasing the game would make them look like an old and behind the time company. Star Fox 2, which was already 95% finished when Nintendo decided to cancel the release, was put in a Nintendo vault to never be realized again. Until they thought, hey, easy money, and released it with the Super NES Classic Edition and later on the Nintendo Switch Online game section. This is therefore also one of the few cancelled games on this list you can play. The game is more or less the same as the first one, but the hype and speculations around the game, even though it was cancelled was one that most Star Fox fans took part in. Star Wars 1313 and Battlefront 3. So I don't know why these two are put together, as they are two different games. Maybe because they're from the same franchise, but there are many other games in the list which are the same. Weird. Anyways, let's just take Star Wars 1313 as beginning, which I'm gonna call it. I'm not gonna call it Star Wars 1313. I'm gonna call it 1313 and that's it. So Star Wars 1313 was going to be a game where you play as a bounty hunter Boba Fett, and doing Boba Fett things like flying around with a jetpack, killing people bounty, and be eaten alive. The game was and still is very anticipated by Star Wars fans, not only because it has been in the making, I guess you'd call it, since 2012, but it's also a game about being a bounty hunter. I mean, how cool is that? The game would have been cool even if it wasn't Star Wars. The game was cancelled in 2013 by LucasArts since there were some internal problems after Disney took over, which ended in a bunch of staff members being fired and laid off. This left the team more or less barren, meaning that the game was cancelled. Or was it? The Star Wars community seems to be a very stubborn one, either good or bad, as they kept talking about the game and the many leaks surrounding it. LucasArts and Disney got things worked out, and now things might be going back to production. I mean, I hope so, the game sounds pretty cool. Well, Battlefront 3, look at that. Battlefront 3 was going to be the third installment in the Battlefront series. Oh, wow, really? But it seems that the developers of Free Radical Design got a case of the valves and couldn't release a third game. The production started in 2006 and ended in 8. The game got cancelled because of Free Radical's incompetence, which led to many missed dates and slow working hours, which led to Lucasfilm giving Free Radical the boot. And that's why we don't have the game. Slow working hours. However, just like Star Wars 1313, there are rumors of development being afoot, and even rumors that the game will be out in 2022. So maybe the game isn't that dead after all. The game is going to follow the others in style and gameplay, but apparently it will have its own little story arc. They're also going to add the new movies to the game, which some are going to be pissed about because, I don't know, some Star Wars stuff. I mean, it's a movie, come on. Among Us 2. Hey, look, it's the thumbnail. So, the game Among Us was supposed to be nothing special. It even started its first 2 years without any kind of big popularity. That, of course, changed. A lot. But, lo and behold, Innislav, they plan on making Among Us 2 in hopes of making a better, more refined version of the game. However, the unexpected rise in popularity that Among Us got, things had to change, since now there was no real need for a sequel. They plan on making Among Us 2 to give more life to the game, but YouTube changed that and they are now sticking rich. Like, they're rich. Releasing the game now wouldn't make that much of a difference and would only make them look greedy. Among Us 2 was therefore cancelled, and now you'll be stuck with Among Us forever. And trust me, it ain't leaving. Those kids aren't either. Every good cheap game gets absorbed by these weird children. It always fucking happens. Doom 4. Doom 4 was going to be the 4th Doom game. Man, what a genius. It was originally just supposed to be another Doom game which would follow the popularity of the others, but Doom had recently seen a surge in popularity, so giving the Doom franchise more life only made sense. However, the company that started production, ID Software, wants to remake the Doom style. Sure, the fans just wanted more, but just releasing the same game with the same premise in the same place might make some fans bored, even annoyed. So taking the Doom style through a different change might give some more excitement to the fans. Except, funny enough, it turned out to be the exact opposite. The gameplay style would take a drastic change, not even taking place in hell, and also abandoning the demons and replacing them with quote-unquote demons. Even the gameplay style is different. The developers mockingly called it Call of Doom or Battle Doom, since it no longer felt like a Doom game, but rather a game with a Doom mod installed. But scrapping the idea altogether was too late now, so they tried to continue, yet development went down to a crawl and almost stopped. Then, God Almighty Bethesda joined in hopes of making the game work. Yet, they didn't, and they too had problems with giving the game life. They therefore cancelled the game altogether, almost 6 years after the game began to be created. Fez 2. The cancellation of Fez 2 is not that much of a story of the game, but rather the man behind it, called Fish. As a sum up, Fez is a two-dimensional indie platformer where you play as a little short guy with a fizz. The game gave a lot of people a gleeful and near nostalgic kind of feeling, making it very popular among fans. The story of Fez 2 was not, however. During the in-between time of Fez 1 and the making of Fez 2, the creator, Fish, became something of a well-known indie developer thanks to the game's high praise and Fish's role in the indie game movie. Even though this led to his career's rise and made his fan base grow, not to mention the added hype for Fez 2, it also came with a downturn. As Fish became more and more active on Twitter and other platforms, his views became more well-known. And despite being a video game creator and a well-known man in the video game industry, he actually had a distaste of the gaming industry and even gamers. The many remarks made by Fish and people's angry responses led to a lot of conflict. He denounced Microsoft because of their policies, he got called out by many podcasts surrounding his behavior, and he was even told to kill himself on a few occasions. This led to him quitting the gaming industry altogether along with Fez, which now is cancelled forever. WWE 2K21. WWE 2K21, a series of yearly wrestling games that started back in the beginning of the 2000s, will not make a 2020 game. It's one of those franchises that continuously posts the same game each year with a new update and some bug fixes, so seeing them not make a game feels out of the ordinary. But again, 2020, the year where the game was supposed to be released, was also very out of the ordinary, which was also partly the reason for the game being cancelled. The company could not properly build the game from the home and could not enter the office to build the game, making production nearly impossible. If you combine that with the terrible review the last game got and the need for a lot of fixes, then the game is in quite a dark place. These two factors led to the game not being a reality in 2020. However, the WWE 2K team has said that the new game will be out to buy in 2021, so it's not that they're missing something major. It's simply a hole in the line of the games. The major thing about this might be that it's a very popular game which got cancelled, but it'll be out next year. Prey 2. Prey 2 was a cancelled first-person shooter which was going to be published by Bethesda. The plot of the game surrounded two human beings being abducted by an alien spacecraft which transferred them to the planet called Exodus. One of the men, called Killian Samuels, has no memory of his life before the abduction. He's now a bounty hunter on the planet and believes himself to be the only human on the planet. Of course, he isn't the only human, there's another one called Tommy, and they eventually meet up to try and defeat some enemies together. And in fairness, that's all we really know, since the game is, not out and never will be. The game was planned to be a sequel to the game Prey, hence the name, you idiot, but ultimately got cancelled after having to switch developers, and eventually not meeting the quality standards of Bethesda. Wait, they have quality standards? Prey 2 was therefore cancelled, yet it got a reboot. Well, kind of. Instead of finishing Prey 2, they released a new game in 2017 called Prey, as a sequel to the game Prey. Prey and Prey. Nice job. So, Prey 2 is dead, yet we still got something. A lot of question marks, but generally we got something. But generally, Bethesda, it looks like it just didn't work. RE 1.5. RE 1.5, which stands for Resident Evil, was a cancelled version of Resident Evil 2, which was supposed to be released in March 1997. The game got cancelled in the same year as the game was supposed to be released, since the game makers didn't like how the resulting project looked, and thought it would be a bad game. Therefore, instead of releasing a game they felt dissatisfied with, they threw out the whole ordeal out the window and started from scratch. The game was more or less finished, though they still scrapped it to make a new game. RE 1.5 and the actual Resident Evil 2 have some similarities, yet there are still some things which are different. Very different. One of them being that the zombies were way tougher and acted different than they do in the rest of the games, being able to survive their head being shot off and could even jump from ledge to ledge. There were 2 enemies that was completely cut from the game and has also never been seen since. These enemies being man spiders and infected gorillas. Sounds fascinating. How do they look? Oh, that's quite disturbing. No, not that. That is disturbing. Oh well. Even Raccoon City changed style, yet mostly stayed the same. But again, we don't know much about the game, and this is mostly all we know, since it was scrapped. StarCraft Ghosts. StarCraft Ghost was a military science fiction video game developed by Blizzard Entertainment. It was intended to be a part of Blizzard's StarCraft series and was announced in September 2022. Later on, in 2006, they announced that the game would be put on hold, while the company investigated 7th generation video game possibilities for the game. And they kept searching for them for 8 years until they just said it was cancelled. During an interview with Polygon in 2014 about the cancellation of Titan, spoiler, Mike Mohame confirmed that StarCraft Ghost was also cancelled. He says, "It was hard when we cancelled Warcraft Adventures. It was hard when we cancelled StarCraft Ghost, but has also resulted in better quality work." Another reason for why the game got cancelled is because the game was going to be finished just as the Xbox 360 would come out, while the game was going to be for the last console, meaning that there would be released a new game for an outdated console. Switching from one console to another could cause a lot of trouble and money wasting, which meant that it just didn't happen. If there is 2 things that are important in the life of video games, it's money and timing. Gotham by Gaslight. Gotham by Gaslight was going to be a game reminiscent of the Arkham Asylum games, of course, starting Batman. However, this game had a cool premise of being set in 1889's Victorian Europe. The game was going to have a heavy steampunk feel and would explore just a bit of the old European cities. In the game, Batman would try and find Jack the Ripper and capture him. As you can hear, the game has a very British vibe to it. I guess Alfred isn't going to be the only one with a cool British accent in this one. The game was supposed to be a part of the DC alternate reality story mode about their many heroes, being set back in different time eras. But the game got cancelled at the end despite their fans thinking it was a very cool premise, including me. Pretty cool. The exact reason for the game's cancellation is still unknown, yet one theory might be that the game was too outlandish of an idea and wouldn't gather enough attention to make enough profit for the developers. The dev team was also unexperienced as they've never actually made a Batman game before, so that might have something to do with it as well. You can still get the 1889's Batman costume in Arkham's Origins, but as you can see in the background, there is also a DC film called Gotham by Gaslight. So even though the game might be cancelled, there is still a movie, which can be seen as a kind of alternative. But that is also the closest we'll get to the actual game. Earthbound 64. Earthbound 64, also known as Mother 3, was going to be the 3rd installment of the Mother series. The game was going to be released in 1999 on the Nintendo 64, but it ultimately became unsuccessful as development slowed down. The dev team was very experienced in making 3D games, which is a thing you probably need to know a bit about if you want to make a 3D game, just saying. Not only with that, but the dev team hadn't even worked in the other Earthbound games either, which was another shortcoming. But the reason why they chose them and not someone experienced because of a financial choice. Yet another shortcoming on the side of Nintendo was the fact that they didn't undergo a trial period where they would try and correct things from the very get-go. Since the game took so long to make, people thought it would be better to release it on the GameCube or even the Game Boy Advance. But those plans were never realized until Nintendo scrapped the whole idea after it was 60% finished. The game itself was going to take place after the other Mother games that would include 12 playable characters in 12 different chapters. But in the end, the game never came out. Banjo 3. Banjo 3, which is a very hard thing to say, is the name of the third game in the line of the Banjo-Kazooie timeline, or the main games, I guess. The thing about this game is that it isn't out, nor was it ever even in development. It was not even planned to be made. In the end of the last Banjo-Kazooie game in the timeline, called Banjo-Tooie, the antagonist says that she'll get revenge and that she'll get them in Banjo 3. The thing just is that the game was never a reality and was probably more of a joke than anything. Especially when realized that Banjo-Kazooie was released in 2000 and 2001. There was more Banjo-Kazooie games like Nuts and Bolts, but that turned out to be quite a failure. So it's not that much of a cancelled game. But some could imagine that it might have been underway, but the harsh response from Nuts and Bolts made them question if releasing another game would have been a good idea. But that is just a theory. And no, shut up, I know what you're thinking about. Call of Duty Vietnam. Call of Duty Vietnam, also called Fog of War by developers, was a Call of Duty installment which was going to be released sometime in the 2010s. The game was, not surprisingly, going to take place in the Vietnam War from the 60s to 70s in Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos. Yeah, not Laos. Laos. The game was apparently pretty hard to make since after 8 months in development, Sledgehammer Games could carve up a whole 15 minutes of gameplay. That is about 2.7 seconds of gameplay made per day. Since the developers were bogged down and had a hard time making the game, Activision offered Sledgehammer Game could work on Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 with Infinite Ward instead. So instead of hardly even being able to make the game because of a lack of direction, they would help a game which was planned to be released quickly. It was not confirmed that the game would be cancelled entirely, some saying it was rather on hold if anything. The game was confirmed cancelled in May 2014 when Sledgehammer announced they would be working on Call of Duty Advanced Warfare instead of Call of Duty Vietnam. It was the final nail in the coffin for the game in a way. While we might not see a Vietnam game be released anytime soon, Call of Duty Cold War did partly take place in Vietnam, so maybe some of the ideas from the game was implemented into this game. The game was going to be different from the rest, being the first third-person only game and would focus a bit more on history. But the dream of a Vietnam Call of Duty game isn't totally dead, as Sledgehammer said that if the studio ever asked to make a third-person Call of Duty game again, they would continue development on Call of Duty Vietnam. So not totally dead, but still rather unlikely. Project Titan. Project Titan was a cancelled game which was going to be one of Blizzard Entertainment's massive online multiplayer games, which was going to be released in 2007. It was going to be a totally original game, being a new main franchise game for Blizzard. It was cancelled officially in September 2014, 7 years after development officially began. Later on, 40 members of the Titan Project team took the ideas from Titan and made it into a new game called Overwatch, which is now Titan's spiritual successor. Now that might sound a bit fancy, but it basically means that Overwatch is the new Titan. The game was more or less something in the style of Overwatch, being a first-person shooter with a class to pick from. However, a skill tree was also implemented, which would grant classes more power as time went on. This, however, turned out to be a bad idea, as it would lead to a lot of overpowered combinations and would make the game both confusing and irritating to play. In the end, the sheer scope of Titan was too much for the game developers to make, which made the game unplayable and unfixable. Therefore, the game was reanimated into Overwatch, which seems to be pretty well, actually. The Black Box. The Black Box is not that much of a cancelled game, as it's a cancelled bundle of games. The Black Box was going to be the Orange Box cheaper alternative. For those that don't know, the Orange Box is a bundle of Valve games you could buy, which included 5 games, those being Half-Life 1, Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and Half-Life Episode 2, Team Fortress 2 and Portal all in one giant bundle. These bundles were Valve's way of experimenting with the gaming industry to see if they could make some kind of breakthrough. But the orange box sold really well, the lesser black box did not and was removed entirely. The black box was going to be the lesser alternative to the orange box, only holding 3 games: Half-Life 2, Episode 2, TF2 and Portal, only containing the newest game costing $10 less than the orange box. This cancellation did come with some controversy, as Valve now had forced their player base to buy the whole ordeal with the orange box. This inevitably forced some of their buyers to buy the box even if they already owned the previous games, so Valve made some of their players buy the same game twice. In response, Valve gave the game they already owned as codes, which could be gifted to their Steam friends. This was a rather greedy choice on the side of Valve, since they basically forced people to buy the whole ordeal and then having to gift away the things they already owned. This only made the black box into more trouble even after it was gone. The black box is now nothing more than a memory, as yet another Valve bundle which we will never see again, since the games are either free or something you could buy separately or in other bundles. Team Fortress 2 original versions. So, speaking of TF2, Valve announced Team Fortress 2 2. Now that's the heavy update you've been waiting for. Well, no, TF2 never had a cancelled sequel, but rather TF2 as a game went through many different phases during production. One of these phases was a totally new spin on the game called Team Fortress 2 Brotherhood of Arms, making TF2 into a military shooter with an emphasis on realism. It was almost a reboot of the game in a way, since they completely changed the role of the last game. Most things stayed the same-ish, having the same classes, objectives, huts and maps, yet they drastically changed the art style. The art style of TF2 is one of the things the game is highly praised for, yet in this game it was the classic military look they went for. The classes also lost all their personality and became average soldiers, even though the guns and playstyles mostly became the same. Not only with that, but 2 other classes were added, that being the Marine, the basic soldier class with a rifle and a rocket launcher, which isn't soldier, and the new class which was the Officer, which would lead the way for the team, increase morale, and use many tactical weapons and mechanics to get an advantage in the game. The game would have some kind of ranking system where the officer would lead the way and the rest of the team of the soldiers would be on his command, having more of a Rising Storm vibe than a TF2 vibe. Inevitably, Valve scrapped the idea as it was too basic and would not catch the eyes of many. They therefore opted to make Team Fortress 2 Invasion. There were 2 scrapped TF2 games. A lot of 2s going on here. TF2 Invasion took the game a whole new direction, being an alien vs human game. It was also here that the game began to form into the TF2 we all know, both the character's look, design and classic art style. This didn't rub off the right way for Valve either, which ended in making a 3rd game, being the good old TF2 we know today. Well, good old TF2, it's changed a bit since then. Cheddar Man 2. Cheddar Man 2, which I think it's how I pronounce that weird name, was going to be the sequel of Cheddar Man 1. It was probably one of those weird and strange games with a Makahana, which could be bought for like half a fucking Christ, $14,000? What? Okay, so I think I'm missing just a few things here. Well, anyways, Cheddar Man 2 was going to be the sequel for this thing, planned to be released in 1992, but it never officially came out. However, this game wasn't discarded like the other games on this list. No, they actually fucking made it. Even though the game was never officially released, a warehouse in Florida apparently revealed to have 1,500 copies of the game just kind of laying around. These games therefore became prized possessions, as we can see. So, is it a rare good game? Did it try something new? Was it groundbreaking? Huh, no. In fact, some say it's one of the worst games out there, being up there with Hong Kong 97 and the others. It was both boring, buggy, and incomplete. However, their characters became instant classics because why wouldn't they? That's peak 90s. So it was cancelled yet the game still got shipped. It's incredibly weird. And of course the game got located in Florida because why wouldn't it? It's Florida. Thrill Kill. Thrill Kill is an unreleased fighting game developed by Paradox. And no, not that Paradox, I got excited as well. The game was going to be published by Virgin Interactive, really downplaying yourself there, huh? In October 1998, but was dropped after certain changes in power happened. In August 1998, Westwood Studios, which owned the rights to Virgin Interactives, which stood for the publishing of the game, was purchased by Electronic Arts and got the rights over all of Virgin Interactive, which included the release of Thrill Kill. After a brief look at the game, Electronic Arts decided to drop the game outright. They had been empowered in just 2 months and decided to drop the game entirely. According to the programmers, the game was already 99% finished and near ready to be published. Yet Electronic Arts didn't care and just discarded the game entirely. It has never been seen since. If Virgin Interactive had been a company for just 2 months longer, the game would have been released. Yet EA just dumped an entirely finished game out the window. But why? If they had a game that could make money, why just drop it? Well, according to them, it was a bit too gruesome for their liking. Back in the days of 1998, and I guess still today to some degree, video games had a stigma of being a more violent alternative to movies and films. Therefore, to rid the gaming industry of this image, EA didn't want to release Thrill Kill. But what was this game anyways? Could the game really be that violent that it would damage the entire image of the video game industry? Well, the game was about 10 people being sent to hell after death, where only one could escape by reincarnation. This was all controlled by the goddess of secret, Maruka. Instead of traditional health bars, in Thrill Kill you had kill meters, which were bars that would fill more and more after each successful landed hit. When the kill meter was filled, the player could do a Thrill Kill, which was a finishing move which would splinter the enemy entirely in very gory ways. So yeah, it was very violent, but is it still worth cancelling an entire game ready to be shipped just for that? I don't really know, maybe you have an opinion on it or something. Nintendo Giga Leak. The Nintendo Giga Leak was one of the many leaks posted on the 4chan website from hackers who had infiltrated Nintendo's database and leaked some information about the company and their games. There have been many leaks coming from Nintendo, some are still being posted to this very day. However, the Nintendo Giga Leak of 2020 was the biggest leak yet, having up to 3 gigabytes of data and information about the company's games. Nintendo hasn't made an official statement about the leaks yet, either because of embarrassment, they don't want to give the hackers credit, or something third or fourth. While a lot of information was leaked, like source codes, development diaries and more, there wasn't that much leaked information about cancelled games per se. Yet, there was a lot of cancelled containment that was going to be in the games. There are walls upon walls of scrapped ideas from most Nintendo games that have been released, all the way from the NES to the Switch. Unused Pokemons for good reasons, planned items which didn't make the cut, and a whole lot of Luigi. Apparently it was going to be used in a lot more places than Nintendo wanted him to be. Poor guy. So it's not really one giant scrapped game, but more a lot of scrapped content for games. Still counts, and it's still pretty cool. So we didn't find the next Pokemon game per se, but we did find a lot of interesting content, and there's still more coming this way. Scalebound. Scalebound was going to be an action RPG from Platinum Games. The games went through 5 years of development before being cancelled. The game was about a guy called Drew and his soulbound friend, Dinosaur Dragon Being. And when I say soulbound, I mean it. Not only is it the title of the game, but their souls are bound. If one dies, the other one comes with them. So like a suicide pact of sorts. The game had some kind of special gameplay where I had to keep an eye on both characters at once. Platinum Game began the production back in 2006, yet damn near the very second they decided to make it, they moved on to something else. They began working on Bayonetta, and then later went on to Wonderful 101. Fast forward some time, 7 years, they realized they have completely forgotten Scalebound. being distracted with other things to do, and began production. So when they finally began production, Microsoft kind of swooped in and bought the rights to it. It continued production, but again, it seemed like there were better things to do than Scalebound. Combining that with the many unmet deadlines, the game eventually got cancelled. A very bummy ride for a game like that. And it sounds like you're just like the forgotten child of the company. I mean, wow, it got backlash just a few times. Metal Arms 2. So, you've probably never heard of Metal Arms 2 or Metal Arms 1 for that matter, which is also why the game was never made. Metal Arms 2, while being critically acclaimed, underperformed commercially, and didn't get the attention needed to give good profit to the company who made the game. Metal Arms 2 had begun production not long after Metal Arms 1 had come out, but with the lack of commercial reception, the game was cancelled only 3 months into development. This Metal Arms game, while being one of the more popular of Vivendi's games, also began the downfall of the company. They didn't really have the knowledge on how to sell games, which slowly crippled the company. Swinging Apes was later acquired by Blizzard, and the Vivendi game became a part of Activision later on. Metal Arms 2, therefore, doesn't really stand a chance of coming back to life. The game was going to flesh out the Metal Arms universe, both revealing Glitcher's background and expansion of the Morbots and their plans, but the rest we will never know. Forever. It's gone. It's dead. Totally gone, dude. Call of Cthulhu, Destiny's End. Call of Cthulhu, Destiny's End was going to be a sort of sequel to the 2005 game called Call of Cthulhu, Dark Corners of the Earth. As the name literally shouts at you, the game was going to be based on the H.P. Lovecraft novel Cthulhu, and was pretty much going to be a kind of playful sequel to the book. It even takes place in Innsmouth, which is the same New England town that the book is from. The game began development in 2002 under the name Call of Cthulhu Beyond the Mountains of Madness. Wait a minute, the sequel to 2005, development in 2002, time loop? Well, time and space aside, the game came into a lot of trouble pretty much from the get-go, since it was the wrong thing at the wrong time. It started out as normal game development, just developing a game like normal. However, Guillermo del Toro, that Spanish guy from the Silent Hill stuff, was at this point working on another game called Call of Cthulhu Tainted Legacy. This game was based on the book At the Mountains of Madness. A bit familiar. Not only with that, but the game was scheduled to release in 2004 and Destiny's End was scheduled in 2005. In a way, this game was sabotaged pretty much from the very start, seeing that another company with more experienced people were working on a project that was pretty much the same, which on top of that was going to be released before their game. Some chaos broke out in HRV production, the creators of the game. What happened after that is not really known. 2 things could have happened. Actually 3. The last one is like a weird theory, but it still counts, I guess. The first thing that could have happened was that HIP just straight up gave up and cancelled the game. They threw the towel in the ring. The ring and the towel. They threw up. Ew. Seeing a game that big which could steal their potential player base made them think that the game was unsellable and just gave up. The second thing that could have happened is that the 2 projects merged, which basically meant that the HIV production would give their game development to the creators of the other game. This way, HIP could both save some slack and maybe even get a bit out of the game. The third and more strange and rabbit hole-like theory is that the game was never even real. Yeah, I know, I'm fucking laughing too, it's genius. It could have been a vaporwave, which just meant that the game was announced way before production even began. This theory began in March 2006, where HIP had not only gone bankrupt, but was also liquidated. So while some games have a chance of making a comeback, this game does not. Fallout Van Buren. Fallout Van Buren, which is only the code name, originally being an iteration of Fallout 3, was a game developed by Black Isle Studios. The game had high hopes, since it not only had a planned sequel, but also an advanced combat system being over a page long just to describe the basics. It is also from an internet discussion by fans, so it might not be that glorious. The game was cancelled, of course, not because of any kind of giant drama fight or internal fallout in the game, No, the publishers at Internal Play Entertainment just didn't have the money. The game was going to follow the classic Fallout style, being set in Nevada on the border with the new California Republic. It is of course also a hellscape of weird mutants and weirdos. But it is America, so nothing new, I guess. Haha, European jokes. As a major plot point, old guy Victor Presper had a plan to commit biological genocide on the masses using a new plague. And I think that was it, actually. South Park open world game. In the faraway age of 2005, the team behind the TV show South Park planned on making an open world game. The South Park game was going to be a sort of continuation of the first South Park game, which was okay popular actually. The game was going to be made by Ubisoft and Boss Monkey Software and be released on the PlayStation 2, Xbox and GameCube, but of course it was cancelled. Why? Good question. We don't really know. It wasn't even announced before it was cancelled. It's only really known to the world because of a YouTube channel called Happy Console Gamer who found some footage from the game and made a video about it. It was obviously going to be an open world game and mimicking the feels of GTA and that one Homer Simpson game that Game Grumps and Only Plays played. The South Park group has already made a lot of games before and after, so maybe the game just didn't feel right to them. We definitely have a lot of South Park humor to find, both in the games and show, so there's not that much to cry over really. Obsidian Alien RPG. The Obsidian Alien RPG, which is going to be called Aliens Crucible, don't know why I just called it that, it was going to be released by Sega and start development in 2006. In the game, you're going to play against the classic aliens, and by that I mean those burst out the chest kind of aliens called xenomorphs on their home planet. The game mechanics were going to make people feel like they were stranded and abandoned, since there were a limited amount of material to work with and characters would permanently die if killed. There isn't that much known about the gameplay actually, it's more the cancellation that's amazing in this part. As the game was getting ready to be released in 2009, Sega themselves released Alien vs Predator. This meant that the release of Crucible would be delayed to not flood the market with aliens. Probably, we don't really know why. Then, in the same year, Creative Assembly announced the beginning of Alien Isolation. Apparently, this was the last xenomorphic straw for them as they pulled the plug on the game. The exact reason for why is still not known, and was probably not to flood the market, but that is only me dumping all I have in my brain out of the table. Not much, I know. Shadow of the Eternal. Shadow of the Eternal is the spiritual successor of The Eternal. Of course, it never came out, but still. It has a bit of a dark theme, which makes sense since it is a horror adventure game after all. During the trailer of the game, such things as weird Wendigo monsters can be seen, as well as medieval surroundings, probably being the theme of the game, as well as the Eye of Sauron for some reason. Oh, and Hell 2, because you can't miss that. The game was anticipated by a lot of fans, being backed with money and support, yet that money did to some extent go wasted as the game was cancelled after a struggle with production. In 2016, the game was cancelled despite the nearly $300,000 raised by fans to make the game. However, the devs have said that the game isn't dead and might still come out, but the long story and journey of the game might say otherwise. Will it come out? Maybe, but I think those $300,000 have been wasted. Sorry guys. Super Mario's Wacky World. Super Mario's Wacky World is a weird blend between Super Mario World and those educational Mario games you've seen before. It was developed by Nova Logic and was going to be for the Philips CDI system, which was a one-of-a-kind system. Not really owned by Nintendo, but Sony and Philips. In the game, you will play as any kind of Mario game. Go from left to right, run, jump, stomp. Oh, you can stomp the Goombas. And they can't walk into you. In fact, you can't take any damage at all. Okay, the game is very unfinished, and that's all we've seen, so we don't know if you can even die, like in Super Mario World, or not, like in the educational games. And just like that, we don't really know which of the games it looked like the most, Super Mario World or the educational games. The game select screen was also kind of weird. Instead of going from world to world, maybe even on a map, like they did at the time, you had this screen where you could pick from different worlds. Tubular? Yeah, bruh, totes. Fucking kill me. The enemies also had different attire from each level, which I think is a pretty nice touch. The game actually got pretty positive reviews from Big Data and Nintendo, which saw it as a good potential for a game. Or, well, that was until they realized that it was with the Philips CDI system, which had the same interest rate as me. And it was a dying system, so they opted to scrap the whole thing. I mean, you could convert it to the SNES or something, right? I don't know jack about coding, but it seems like a better alternative than just scrapping the game, right? Scrap Conker's game. Conker has seen its fair share of games throughout the year. However, back in 2002, a glorious year, Rare began to make a new Conker's game called Conker's Other Bad Day as a sort of continuation of Conker's Bad Fur Day. But in 2002, Rare was bought by Microsoft from Nintendo, which also meant that the development of the game was shifted from Japanese to American. Instead of continuing the development of the game, Microsoft decided to throw the game out the window and make a continuation of the famous game Conker's Bad Fur Day. Yes, so Microsoft took a continuation, threw it out the window, and made a continuation. High level strategy right here. The reason for why they did that was not revealed until 2012, a whole 10 years after the production of the game originally began. A co-worker at Rare called Chris Seaver said that it had some great graphics and concepts done for sure, but didn't really get much further than that. It ended on a bittersweet note. Other than that, it was going to be just another Conker's game, but Microsoft had other intentions. Insane. Insane was not a cancelled game, but a whole planned trilogy which got cancelled. It was developed by Volition with the help of director Guillermo del Toro. That guy again. He must be some kind of big shot, huh? I don't know him, so. The game was announced at the Spike Video Game Awards show in 2010 with a 30-second trailer, and it was cancelled 2 years later. The cancellation was caused because of the publisher's THQ's bankruptcy. Now, Del Toro owns the rights to the game and could, in theory, get someone else to make it. Probably not, but still, always a hope. The game seems to be one that Del Toro was excited to make, as he wanted to try a new kind of game. Del Toro wanted to make a game filled with mindfucks and pseudo-philosophical tricks and gimmicks. It was going to challenge a player's vision of reality and morality through the entire game. It was also going to be a survival horror, which was going to add fear to a roller coaster of moral insecurity. A bit evil, but it's not like it's been done before. It sounded like a promising game, but Volition's bankruptcy ended the journey before it could even begin, and now Del Toro is the only one that can save it. Not that he's going to, but still. Sadness. Sadness was going to be a survival horror game for the Wii. Not only with that, but it was one of the first games announced with the Wii system. I don't know about you, but when I think of Wii, I think of Wii Golf. Especially golf. Wii Sports too, but especially Wii Golf. The game takes place in the Russian Empire in a pre-World War I state, where the player gets stranded in the waste of the Russian Ukraine after a failed trip to Lvov. The main character encounters many monsters and enemies which were based on Slavic mythology. The game could have a total of 10 endings with a branding storyline. It was especially praised for its original spin on a survival horror game, not focusing so much on aggressive violence but rather on physical horror, which would surprise players. They were going to use the nunchucks motion sensing to good use as well, as it would work as their hands, which could be used to wield tools like a torch, bottles, knives, clubs, and all so much more things to help with your hands. It was also going to be set in black and white, which many people thought was a very nice touch. Most things looked promising for this game. However, development was not something smooth. It apparently went through development hell. The company was unable to meet deadlines constantly, there were constant disputes over the art and design of the game, and the staff was slow too. Apparently, after a year, they finished the script, concept design, and had one designed minecart. That was it. After they missed the deadline in 2009, it was said that the Briss, the developers, were always better at commercializing the games than actually making them. In 2010, the game was cancelled since nothing was done. Kind of an annoying way to go, since the game sounded interesting and promising, but I guess the internal struggle slowed the game's development down to a slow crawl and eventually death. Lost ZX Spectrum prototype. Oh god, it's computer geek time. So first off, what is the ZX Spectrum in the first place? Well, it's a sort of microcomputer from the 80s, which can be used for a lot of things, like computer things, but still a lot of computer things. Yeah, sorry, my baby brain doesn't really work that well with coding and computers. There was a whole series of them being quite good for the time, but apparently they also had a cancelled version, it looked like. It looked like this. Oh yeah, that's a prototype. A channel known as Retro Tech Archives, featuring Adrian and Phil, who are members of a computer history museum, got a special little surprise from the creators of the ZX Spectrum, which was a prototype never seen before in public. In the video, they showed it around, how it functions and what's unique about it. Apparently, it was cancelled since it was a bit too slow and wanky for the time, so it would be better to try and focus on something else. Not really a game, but it did have many games on it, apparently. Some we are never going to see again. Kurayami. Kurayami was going to be a horror game for the PS3 by Grasshopper Manufacture. The game was going to be about a dark, creepy and European castle and the surrounding village. The village was filled with creepy citizens, the castle was going to be mysterious and dark, and the gameplay was going to be alienating and physically thrilling, according to them at least. The game was heavily inspired by Franz Kafka's writing and style. The main inspiration came from the book The Castle, which might be why the game takes place around a castle. Just a feeling, you know. The game's central theme was going to be darkness and light, where the lit areas were safe and the dark areas were going to be dangerous. Not only would light and dark change the gameplay and the main character, but also the townsfolk and other characters would change from normal to scared. The game, however, seems to be more of a pitch than an actual game, as it never even entered the prototype form. We never got to see any kind of gameplay, but only concept art. The developers, Suda51 and Grasshopper, was focused a lot on other games like Zero, Tsukihime no Kamen, and No More Heroes, the later one becoming the most successful game. Kurayami was therefore constantly put on a back burner until the flame fizzled out, quietly being cancelled, as a bigger fish to fry. Now the game remains dead, unless Grandpa wants to try again. The City of the Dead. The City of the Dead was going to be a 2006 first-person shooter based on the movie with the same name. Both the game and the movie saw a mass zombie outbreak after the military fucked up some tests, as always. On the island of Nungun Futuro, Butchered, which is Spanish for no future. Thanks Google, I can't speak a word of Spanish. On the island, you had to survive the zombie outbreak and do other stuff, with a lot of gore and bloody violence to a point where it might have been overboard. It is here the line gets blurry as we don't know much else. The game was developed by HIP Interactive, oh yeah, they're back, which of course went bankrupt in 2006, and the game was cancelled in 2005. The game had an E3 trailer and everything, yet HIP's lacking grip on money and the already light budget meant that the game was forever cancelled along with HIP. I wonder how many games went into that grave with them. Dead Phoenix. Dead Phoenix, which isn't a Phoenix Wright game as I thought for a second, and with a very dark twist to the game, was actually a game made by Capcom and was going to be for the GameCube. It was actually highly anticipated, being a part of Capcom 5, which included subtitles as Resident Evil 4, Piano 3, Beautiful Joe, and Killer 7. However, as other games began to be released, Dead Phoenix just kind of stayed in the production, and stayed, and now we're here. In a way, the game was never actually cancelled, but production is just still going 20 years later. Capcom has never actually announced the cancellation of the game and has refused to comment on the lack of production and, well, existence. So officially, it's not actually cancelled, but more forever in a state of limbo. I doubt they're going to release a 2003 game in 2021, or after, so let's just presume it's dead. The game does have some gameplay footage and did come far in production, yet it's not here. What game? Well, Capcom can keep their secrets, but I'm just gonna keep wishing for a 2003 game to release now. That'd be fucking amazing. If they just now released like a game for the GameCube mid 2021, that'd be fucking amazing. Ravenholm. Half-Life 3 spin-off. Return to Ravenholm was going to be a Half-Life 2 spin-off, also called Half-Life 2 Episode 4. It was we can't get it free. That's so funny. The game was going to take place in the European town of Ravenholm, somewhere before the end of Episode 2. We were going to play as Adrian Shepard from Half-Life opposing forces, who had to endure the forgotten, zombie and headcrab-filled town. There were a countless amount of zombies, a headcrab bite cure, or at least some kind of minimize of its effect, and monkeys. The game, which was built by Arkane and not Valve, thought the game to be a simple spin-off, yet Valve gave them a platform of opportunity and even said that Ravenholm could be a part of the Half-Life project. If they could make a convincing game, it would be a part of the franchise. However, after longer than expected gameplay periods and developments, Valve changed their mind either because they weren't impressed or they thought it was gonna take too long, and pulled the plug, letting Ravenholm's project slowly die out. After the plug, the game already had 8 out of 9 chapters finished and was well on its way, but Valve said their opinion and the game never saw the light of day. To this day, Arkane likes to show their new employees the unfinished game, just to show what it could have been. Kodoku. Kodoku was going to be a game for the PlayStation Vita, a handheld console released by Sony to try and get some of that Nintendo handheld money. The game was influenced by East Asian culture and myths, and would take place in a strange building in which the player is trapped. Also, lewd. As one site said, the developer aspires to complete the game in the next 3 to 4 months, releasing on PC first, and then hopefully on PS4 and Xbox One. 2016, huh? Kodoku is a very mysterious game, as in I can hardly even find anything about the game. A bunch of shaky and half-working sites is what I've been going off of. The game was developed and going to be published by Carnivore Studios, yet it was all cut short because of financial struggles within the studio. Again, money. The game quickly died because money, but was revived by the art director as Kodoku 3D, which is even harder to find with even more shadier sites. A Wix site which doesn't work, a dead Twitter account, and a bunch of empty search results. Even the iceberg itself is a more popular search result than the game itself. So good on you, Janryu. You made it further than the game itself. I think Kodoku was more of a failed and forgotten experiment than anything else. Demonic. Demonic was a game where instead of taking the role as a boring good guy, you would play as a cool, epic, evil guy. The game was featured in an actual film through production as the most interesting kind of promotion ever. In the movie Grandma's Boys, a video game is played, which many thought was fake, but indeed, it turned out to be Dominic, a game in production. In the game, you will play as a demon who has been summoned by the weak mortals to do their evil bidding. These people felt like they had been unfairly wrong and therefore ordered fucking demons to do things for good sake. The game had a really cool premise of playing as a bad guy, which is something a lot of people want to do, yet developers just don't do that so much. It didn't get finished because of economic problems, you know, the classic. Now the only thing we have left of this game is a few scenes in a movie, and that's it. Airworld. The story of Airworld is a different story from the rest of these games. It's a story about Earthworld, Fireworld, Waterworld, and Airworld. No, serious, it's a 4-game series called Sword Quest, or rather it was going to be. It was split into 4, being Earth, Fire, Water, and Air. The game was a part of an ambitious planned series of Atari games where each game had a competitive side where you could win a total of $25,000 by being the best one at the game. You of course had 4 chances at the different games. When the 4 finalists were found, they would battle against each other in a match where the winner would win a total of $50,000 on top of the money they've already won. The game went great and the competition seemed to be a success, but that was until the Fire World attacked. Or rather, the economic crash attacked. Back in the day of the Atari, a bit of a crack in the gaming industry happened, which was their version of the Wall Street crash. Money said bye-bye, and so had the competition. The other 3 were already finished and had been released, yet the Airwell was in development. Because of economic aid, they had to stop the production of the game and the competition too. The finalists never got a chance to battle it out, and only 3 winners were found. And now the game, and the school competitive idea, is dead forever. God damn you, economy! Joe.
Hello.
Nah, funny enough, that's actually all you get when you search for the game. Okay, maybe more annoying than funny. Now it's just some angry gamer guy. Get creative with the titles, man, come on! Well, anyways, according to the creator of the Iceberg, it says this. After being asked what Joe was about, he basically says it's a generic action game versus terrorist that was canned with little on it. And to be fair, that's okay for me here actually. I don't want to search for Joe Biden again. There's so much Joe Biden you'll think it's a DNC over here. Well, it was a terrorist game and it got cancelled. Oh well, Joe Biden said goodbye. Prospero. Prospero is a cancelled PC game that was in development by Valve while they were working on the Half-Life game. Prospero was canned in 1997 when Valve decided to move their effort to Half-Life, which seems to have been a better idea economically. They also canned the game because of its unoriginality, which some devs feared would make the game unpopular and stale. It also began to lose direction, and it became more and more mainstream and, dare I even say, boring. It was going to be an action-adventure game with a scientific fantasy epic storyline with a lot of experimental mechanics. It seems to have had a heavy Valve style and feel to it, like you can see in most of their games. However, Prospero might be the most important for the Valve lovers, or as much as you can love Valve that is, than we think, as some of the elements from the game were moved over to Portal and Half-Life, and it was basically here a lot of that Valve feel began. There are still some things to see about the game here and there, but ultimately the devs didn't like it and it was scrapped. Flesh and Wire. Flesh and Wire was going to be a game developed by Running Scissors. The storyline revolves around your average half-offensive police stereotype Angus, sleeping in his car. When he wakes up, the world has been invaded by aliens and one of them is nibbling on his feet. Anyways, now that you've been thrown into this weird world, it's time to play, let's go! In the game, you would travel through the city, battling aliens both your gun and your special powers which you got from that alien thing that sucked on your legs. Apparently that nibbling alien could be controlled by Angus, and you would use the aliens to slush around the level and utilize its powers. Running with Scissors cancelled the game because of financial reality. A bit of a reality check, but with money. I get it. No, I actually don't. I fucking love money. The company wants to focus their effort and money on another game, which would surely make bucks and popularity to the company. The game was Postal. Look, that was a good choice after all. But that choice also meant that Flesh and Wire had to go. A soul for a soul. World of Darkness Online. World of Darkness was going to be a massive multiplayer roleplay single-server game with a non-linear style of gameplay. The game had 7 different vampire clans which you could join. These factions were something important, as this was one's title. These clans could either join off in alliances or be rivals in all kinds of political ways. Some of the game's roles could also only be reached if players fought together or against each other. The style of the World of Darkness could be reminiscent of the World of Darkness series, a series of tabletop games with an eerie kind of vibe. As you can hear, the game was pretty fleshed out, and a bunch of players were excited to play the game. However, after 9 years in development, the game was cancelled. Something with The Guardian called a scandal. The game was said to only take about 4 or 5 years to finish, but trouble and chaos inside the CCP, the company of CCP, led to a mass firing of workers, thinly stretched resources, lack of organization, and reducing developer teams. These were all a part of the process which delayed the game more and more. Another game called EVE Online, which CCP also made, was apparently a more popular game to work on, as the World of Darkness team would often set their work aside to go work on the game. At one point, the entire World of Darkness team was working on the game. The office which made the World of Darkness was entirely empty. After many chaotic events and World of Darkness being outshined by EVE Online, the game was slowly cancelled. In 2015, none other than Paradox Interactive acquired the World of Darkness games and currently own the rights to it. So is the game 100% dead? Maybe not. Maybe Paradox, of all things, will finish the game. Or maybe they'll release Victoria 3 a bit faster and come the fuck on. I'm just joking, make a good game. The Ripper. The Ripper was a game developed by Visceral Games back at the time of 2009. The time. In the game, you was play as Jack the Ripper. Wait, did I already have this guy here before? Back in the days of his murdering rampage. Again, playing as the bad guy. We should see that a bit more, shouldn't we? But this game wasn't about murdering prostitutes in the alleys of London. No, in this game, Jack the Ripper fights demons and vampires in the streets of London because why not? Some might say that prostitutes are demons, hahaha, Christianity. You would follow Jack the Ripper both in his killing spree but also his demon hunting. As well as that, you would also see how the literal madman would cope with what he has done. This concept of seeing a serial killer as the good guy was kind of a shaky subject with devs, as they would glorify a murderer. That's something you would usually want to do. But that wasn't the final nail in the coffin though, as Visceral Games had a hard time finding a direction whilst making the game. Constant shifts and turns in vision and direction led to the game being canned forever. The game was cancelled the same year it began production. We got a bunch of artwork for the game, but that's also all we got. Mario Takes America. Mario takes on fucking America for freedom. Actually, the game is Canadian and was going to be published by the Dutch. Sorry, Yankees. The game was going to be another one of those Mario educational games, a bit like Super Mario Wacky Worlds, where Mario will travel across the USA from New York to Hollywood, where, in the end, he would star in a film for some reason. Mario is going to use different vehicles, unlike a traditional run across the entire country scheme. He would use cars, trucks, motorbikes, trains, aeroplanes, and even a helicopter. Mario sure knows how to arrive in style. Throughout the game, Mario will learn about important and well-known spots in America, because even though saving peace is important, knowledge is what is truly valued in a man. We only know about the game from a UK article about the game and a short presentation at the New York CDI 3 conference in the 90s. Philips ended up being unimpressed by the project and cut funding. Left without any financial backing, Cygam, the developers, cancelled the game and went bankrupt in 1994. But again, another one of those Mario educational games. A bit of a weird craze, but apparently a very popular one at that. Diablo Game Boy prototype. Yeah, so apparently the Diablo series almost became accessible on the Nintendo Game Boy. It's a rather short story, but it's still interesting. Especially that they thought that the Game Boy version of Diablo would gather enough attention to give profit to the publishers. And again, profit was the exact thing that welcomed the game to the trash can, as the price over time became more and more steep. Eventually, it wasn't going to be worth selling, so they didn't. Yet development did go far. Development for the game even went so far that we have actual video of the game. The main thing about this game is that the publisher thought it would be a profitable idea to put a game like Diablo on a Nintendo console. I don't know about you, but usually Nintendo is like Soft, Mario, Pokemon, not Diablo, Demon, Death. But again, even then, Diablo was a huge name, so it made sense that you want to expand by putting it on other things than simply the computer. As it seems, in the end, the game was a step too far. Battle Wheels. Battle Wheels, the game, was an actual game for the Atari system back in 1993, which was a vehicle combat game where you would fight other characters using cars. The cancelled game of Battle Wheels was the next game in line in the series, and for some reason, mysteriously, they had the same name, both being named Battle Wheels. I mean, at least have a 2 on there, then you're good, but why just call them both Battle Wheels? Well, it might be because the production of the game was rather short, as it was cancelled almost immediately. The devs only got to make a few 3D models before the game got cancelled. We don't know the reason behind the cancellation to this day, and may felt like the game more or less just vanished. The game did have a sort of expansion of the series in mind, as it remade most of the last game while putting some more characters in the new game. And it's not that the last game was a failure either. In fact, it did quite well, both in review and revenue, so an expansion or sequel would have been a same thing to do. Yet the further production of the game just ended without rhyme or rhythm for some reason. It's now been some 30 years later and the game is, well, dead, and we still don't know why. Legend of the Lost Crater. The Legend of the Lost Crater, also known as the Vyron game, was an RPG planned for the Game.com, but it was never released. It is unknown how much it was done before the cancellation. This is the most you can get if you search for it on ground level at least. I therefore want to dig deeper. However, Game.com is a very unoriginal name for your website, so thanks for that, asshole. The article on Unseen 64 was made in 2009, and oh boy, a lot of things have changed since then. The game as a whole seems to be pretty dull. The website name is unoriginal, the name Byron is used a lot as well, and the concept seems kind of bland as well. The game seems to have gained some kind of popularity, as some people remember seeing the game advertised for them as kids, so it must have been some kind of well-known game. And since it was on TV, it might not actually be on any kind of computer, or rather, it must be some kind of disc. But even the name, Legend of the Lost Crater, gives some kind of deeper meaning, like it's actually lost. But we don't know really what the hell it was, and it's very mysterious, and cancelled. Unreleased shovelware. So first off, let's just get the word shovelware understood. Shovelware is a term for software bundles noticed more for the quantity of what is included rather than the quality of usefulness. The metaphor implies the creators show little care for the quality of the original software, as if the new compilation or version had been created by indiscriminately adding titles by the shovel, in the same way someone would shovel bulk material into a pile. In this context, it talks about how games which are more or less shit, so it can be easily made for a low amount of money and then put on the market in hopes that old granny will buy for a grandchild, so in a way, an advanced form of scam. Now, back to the main title, Unreleased Shovelware. Why would you cancel a thing like that? Just set it out there and see the money flow. By scam. It might be referring to that time Valve kicked a whole bunch of fake games out of their store, since they were scams, or in other words, shovelware. It was a huge purge in 2017, which made most happy, but some people, aka scammers and weird game collectors, a bit annoyed. But there could have been a lot of other cases around the world where people would have removed shovelware or even canceled production of it, because most people doesn't really want anything like that. I mean, it's literally a bundle of shit games, so why would you ever accept those? Well, there you have it. A whole list of forgotten and cancelled games from the gaming industry. Who knew there were this many cancelled games out there? And the crazy stories too. Anyways, this iceberg was made by useless Yenville, which I totally butchered like 110%, who did a really great job at finding all these strange and abandoned iceberg games. If you want to see more, then there's more to see on that channel. How good for you, huh? And feel free to subscribe to the channel as well. No, really, like, maybe 3 of you are. Look at this. Anyways, enough bitching in the kitchen. Hope you have a nice day.